Okay, we will kick off just in the interests of time. Welcome everybody this morning to our Leaders Plus webinar. My name is Laura Boyle. I'm the director of our programme here at Leaders Plus. I'm also a mum of two. I have a 5-year-old, just turned 5, and a 2-year-old as well, and I've just done my first school run of the new academic term this morning. Imagine that's the case for many of you on the call as well. The purpose of this session today is for you to get a really great insight from some of our panelists and fellows from our fellowship programme on managing the transition of your children from kind of the early years stage into primary school, and how to balance that, I guess, with the work day. I think it's well known that the school day and the school schedule doesn't always sync up necessarily with the work day, and so hopefully some of the insights and the advice that we share today will help you understand, I guess, how to better navigate that and achieve, I guess, what the right balance is for you, your career and your family. We have a brilliant set of panelists here with us today, as I've said, and they will introduce themselves shortly. To get the most out of this session, please do feel free to use the chat functionality and share your own tips and advice. And if you have specific questions that you'd like to ask to the panel, please feel free to pop those through on the Q&A functionality as well. Children are incredibly welcome. If you need to duck off to attend to children, absolutely feel free. We are recording this session, so we will send you the recording afterwards. And obviously with the chat, if you could, I think you'd be automatically muted anyway, but if for whatever reason you come off mute, if people could just stay on mute, it just obviously helps with everybody being able to hear. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And we're going to move straight across to our panelists now. So with us today, we have Gabriel Davies, Programme Commercial Director at Orsted. Gabriel was a 2018 Leaders Plus Fellow. We have Mariam Kempel-Hardy, Head of Campaigns for Refuge Action, and Mariam was an Autumn 2020 Fellow. And we have Marina Doce, who is Head of Service Quality Management within Analytics at HSBC. So shortly, our panelists will introduce themselves and share a few tips and insights initially before we go to some structured questions, which you've sent to us. Those of you on the call have sent to us in advance when you registered. So we will kick off with some of those questions, and then we will move across to open up the floor for any further questions that some of our conversation prompts towards the end of the session. We'll also just give you opportunity to learn a little bit more about Leaders Plus, what we do, and how our fellowship can also support people at this kind of transition phase of primary school, and how that works alongside career. So that's what you can expect today. Just to get us going this morning, it would be great to kind of gauge the feeling in the room. So we're just going to pop up a quick poll actually to find out how people are feeling. So if you wouldn't mind just quickly filling that in, and also whilst you're doing that, just note in the chat as well, maybe 3 words as to how you're currently feeling at the moment. So we'll just give you a minute or two to do that. Okay, so it looks at the moment like people are feeling very much like they've not really got any idea how they're going to make it work, but perhaps they've seen others do it before and know that there is a way, and I think that is true for a lot of people, and certainly we can help give some advice there for sure. I'm just looking to see if anyone's given us any words yet. I think people are probably still thinking that through, but hopefully we'll see some of those come through shortly. Frustrated, overwhelmed, defeated. Oh, hopefully this group on the call today can help Francesca overcome some of those feelings. So I just wanted to share actually some of the data that we have we've found, because certainly you're not alone in feeling like that. Some people feeling excited, some people feeling very apprehensive. Want to just quickly share this data with you, because I think it just helps people to feel like they're not necessarily alone in feeling like this is a tricky stage to navigate. Some reports that we found shown that 51% of working parents have said that back to school interferes with work. And actually a survey of over 2,500 women have found that mothers who've returned to work after maternity leave then often choose to take further time out at the point when children start school, because it's such a difficult balance to find between family life and career. And actually 60% of the respondents of one of these reports have shown that actually being at home to support the children with homework and support has meant that people have had to put their careers on hold, and that actually for some working full time is actually proved to be impossible during that phase of people starting children starting primary school. So I certainly, to those points on the chat around people feeling very apprehensive and perhaps feeling like they don't know how to make it work, you're certainly not alone in that. And Leaders Plus is an organisation that is very much here to support people at that stage of wanting to kind of continue their career and potentially move into sort of leadership and senior leadership with young children, and as an organisation that is solely our goal to help working parents do that in a way that means that they don't have to compromise the time and the balance that they want to achieve with their family. The research massively tells us that actually building a tribe and a network of like-minded parents around you is one of the most powerful things you can do to support you as you progress your career with young children. And certainly you'll see some of how powerful that can be through this webinar today. It's not the only thing, and through our fellowship we talk through what some of the other researches that can really help you understand how to continue progressing your career with young children, and we can talk a little bit more about the fellowship if that's of interest to you further on in the session. But for now we're going to move straight over to our panel, and I'd just like to invite each of you to just quickly introduce yourselves, maybe tell us a little bit about work and family, and it would also be wonderful if you could just kick us off and let us know how your connection to Leaders Plus and the fellowship has perhaps supported you at this stage, and also perhaps share with our audience one thing, maybe two things that you wish you had known that you now know with children in primary school. Again, there's probably quite a lot of people on this call whose little ones have maybe just started school or are even about to start school, and you guys have been through that, you have some lived experience of that, so it'd be wonderful if you could just share some initial insights before we go to questions. So Gabriel, could we perhaps come to you first, and we'll go round.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Gabriel. I'm married to Will. We've got two kids, Cleo, who's 7, and she's just started in year 3, and Xander, who's 4, who's just kind of starting reception. It's a bit of a staggered start. So I think, as you mentioned, Laura, I took part in the original Leaders Plus Fellowship. It was in 2018, so it feels like quite a long time ago now. And my son, I think, was only 18 months when I started. In terms of my roles, I'm a commercial director at Ørsted, the Danish renewable energy company. And my current project, we're building what will be the world's largest offshore wind farm off the coast of Grimsby in the UK. So very much kind of engineering focused company that I work for, really big infrastructure, which is a lot of fun. I've always worked full time. But one thing I do is finish at 3 p.m. on Fridays, so I can pick up my kids from school and spend time with them. And that's something actually that I only started doing when my daughter started school. And it's something I've stuck to ever since. It's kind of a non-negotiable for me now at that time. So in terms of what I wish I'd known when my children started school, I think the first thing, they get sick way less now than they did at nursery. So that's a huge relief, makes it so much easier. And the other thing, I think my desire to be a present parent while also progressing my career hasn't changed as they get older. But I do feel a lot more confident than I did about balancing that, that guilt and the ambition. I think it really does get easier, and that's been my experience. So I just kind of want to put a bit of positivity out there around this transition. In terms of my connection to Leaders Plus and the fellowship program, I think there's something that's been a really ongoing takeaway for me, in addition to all the kind of practical advice and tools that I took away from it. But it really removed any sense of shame around wanting to progress my career while also making my family a priority. So the fellowship definitely gave me the confidence to be completely unapologetic in the boundaries I set. So for example, saying I'm going to finish school at 3 p.m, to protect time with my children, but I also protect my career. And my children, they understand that. And in fact, just before we started, I asked my son, I said, is there anything I could do better in terms of parenting and how I work? And he said, well, you could make me a better dinner. And I thought, well, if that's all you've got, it's probably going okay. So yeah, that's a little introduction to me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks so much. And Marina, can we come to you next?
Of course. Hello, everybody. My name is Marina. I am head of service quality management at HSBC within analytics IT. I've got two wonderful children, Eliana, who is 7, just the first day of school today, funnily enough, which has allowed us to enjoy that moment. And our youngest is 3, Jesse. He's in a childcare setting at the minute, but tomorrow is his first day at preschool. My wonderful wife, Esther, and I enjoy spending time with our families, but also are in leadership roles within our careers. And one thing I knew now that I didn't know before, prior to this, is that the both of us work together in terms of balancing our careers. And the word balance is the key here, balancing our careers, as well as giving 100% to our children. And that's the takeaway I've seen from Leaders Plus as well. And that's one of those things that Leaders Plus has helped me cement furthermore, which has helped us grow, helped us focus on our careers when we need to, because I can step in while Esther does hers, and then she can step in and vice versa. But it's effectively working as a team. And that's what one of the takeaways I have with it from Leaders Plus has helped me.
Thanks, Marina. And finally, Mariam, can we come down to you, please?
Hi everyone, yes, I'm Mariam Hardy. I'm the head of campaigns at Refugee Action. I was part of the autumn 2020 cohort at Leaders Plus. And I have 2 boys, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they are more energy than I have. I work 4 days a week, but I do 100% over the 4 days. And in terms of what I guess I wish I'd known when they started, well, Callum started primary school last year, I think it's built up to be this great release. Like you spend years, they go, oh, wait, they're finally going to get to school. When they going to get to school, you'll have, free childcare. Well, it is free childcare until 3 p.m. And it's childcare with a lot more admin, a lot more responsibility on you, without even touching on COVID and homeschooling, because that's a whole other session. So there's suddenly a lot more to do. There's a whole new social kind of scene with parents to get on board. I mean, just in this conversation, I've had several text messages from school and about 1,000 WhatsApps on our particular WhatsApp group. So it just suddenly, you can't just throw them in nursery and leave them there for a lovely day and then get a lovely handover at the end. It's just a lot more very suddenly, and actually you have to find a different mix, a jigsaw of childcare around that. That's what I wish I'd known. It wasn't the great release that I expected it to be. But then in terms of how Leaders Plus has helped, so I joined just at the time that my eldest went to school. I think 2 key things. One is just the moral support knowing that other people were going through the same thing as me, seeing people who were a little bit ahead as well, which was good to kind of see that they've survived it. And I think it was particularly important at that point, because I think rightly there's so much focus on parents when they have their newborn, their first kind of 1 or 2 years of having a kid, because it is a huge thing. But there's not so much discussion actually around primary school age, because it is like, you know, this great release, which isn't quite true. And so that was really, really good to get that sense of community. And then secondly, in terms of feeling able and confident to find ways to develop and to still have that ambition, although the fellowship has helped me work out what that ambition could look like within stability. That's what I've been able to kind of work out. What does stability mean for my family, and how can I fit ambition around that? So that's been really beneficial.
Wonderful, thanks, Mariam. So quite differing experiences there. Like you, Mariam, I think I was unaware of just what it would mean actually, and I definitely was not aware of the kind of endless WhatsApp messages that come from the mum's WhatsApp chat daily about all manner of different things, and then all the weird and wonderful things that kind of going on after school and all of that sort of stuff. So I completely relate there. Let's touch initially on childcare actually, because you've talked about that there, Mariam, and I think it's an important one, because I think the childcare provision does change, and as you say, that they're in school till 3 o'clock, but actually what happens after that, our work days don't finish at 3 often. Could each of you just give as a bit of an insight into, I guess, what those challenges are around childcare at that primary kind of age, and how you have navigated those, and what you've done for that sort of, I guess, that wraparound, if that's, you know, what people are looking for. Does anyone want to go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So, my goodness, childcare, it is a juggle. It is so much more complicated when mine more is just in full-time nursery setting, super easy. And we were doing drop them off, pick them up. You didn't need to worry if one of the nursery workers was unwell, because there was going to be someone else who could take care of them. So the only challenge was really if your child was sick, which did happen a lot, to be fair. So when we moved to the primary school age, we kind of had different options that we looked at. So some kind of after school settings in the previous nursery for my daughter. We did that for a while. And then we, a year ago, decided that we just wanted to have an after school nanny, so that, you know, our children, we'd moved house, they'd moved to a new school. They could come home at 3 o'clock and, you know, go to swimming lessons and all these kind of things. But it's really hard to find someone, at least where we live, who just wants to do those kind of, you know, 3 hours after school, and for us only 4 days a week. So, you know, there's that kind of anxiety around finding someone and then keeping them. And I'm quite happy to share that when we found this wonderful nanny, she was kind of a complete lifesaver for us. And we thought, oh, I really hope we get to keep her for, you know, at least a few years. And then after 9 months, she decided to leave because of family commitments. And honestly, I cried when we got the text message. It was so hard. But, you know, you find someone new. We managed to do that. And that's something that has worked really well, but it does feel precarious. I think that's kind of the ongoing challenge with the childcare. It feels precarious. You never know how long you're going to have someone, and to find someone great is hard. So I think it's something that we're learning from, but it does, you know, although it's still a shock when someone leaves, we know we can find someone else. It's the right balance for our family.
Thanks, Gabriel. And Mariam, Marina, have you gone down the nanny route as well, or have you used other kind of provision that's out there for wraparound care?
So for us, he's in a childcare setting full time. So he goes in at 8 a.m, gets picked up at 3:30 when my wife finishes school. She's a school teacher, so that actually plays very nicely there. However, the eldest, we've built a community around her school, effectively within other parents, so that we and myself do the drop-offs for a group of kids. So I take them in, and then they reciprocate by picking her up and holding her for a couple of hours maybe, or sometimes like dropping off at home when I'm at home now. So that's helped. Having a community around you helps significantly. Obviously, cost-wise, zero, because it's quid pro quo. But there are times where after school clubs is a must, because there aren't anyone to step in there, and that's something that we've helped to keep things going. But having that community, having that support, and having parents who are in the same position as you are helps significantly.
And Marina, did you find that community when you actually joined the school, or did you have a lot of like contact with the parents before they started? How did you build that community? Did it come when they started, or was it from the kind of early years?
It's a case of getting to know the parents. There's a WhatsApp group, so I'm on silent mode in the WhatsApp group, but I always take in that information because there's a lot there. However, when you do the pickups in the next first few months of the year, you get to know the parents, you get to know where they live, who the friendship groups are, and suggest. And at that point, that's where you start building the relationships, because ultimately you're doing them a favor, they're doing you a favor, and everyone's happy in that sense. But yes, it is about building a network. As you do at work, you also do it within your child's life as well. You need to know who their friends are, and therefore who their friends' parents are, and why not?
Yeah, great point. And Marianne, have you got anything else you want to add on the childcare piece?
Yeah, I think on childcare, so what we do is we both do 100% in 4. So I do pick up on Monday and Pete does pick up on Friday, and then we drop them off because we work from home at school start at 8:40 in the mornings, but then we have after school Tuesday to Thursday. So immediately you get a picture of the jigsaw everyone. I think a couple of things. One is when they're in, so we also have a younger one as well who's in a different childcare setting in nursery behind the school. And I think that the key thing that I've learned over the course of the year is that there's so much more information now. Like COVID policy is different between the two schools, for example, two childcare settings. So having to properly sit down with my husband and be like, you need to be on the school emails, not just me, because I was always just on the nursery email. So actually things like that, just equalizing how much information you get and really parceling out who's responsible for which childcare and which thing in the childcare, because otherwise it's suddenly just too much when it's suddenly two different things. I think the other thing I would say about it is that you get so much less information with after school than you do at nursery, and also particularly in COVID. Actually, when you pick them up, you don't get the opportunity to speak to the teachers. So that's something that was quite interesting for us, is not really understanding how the after school system is going to work and what they do, because at nursery you pick them up, you get a whole handover, you might get little photos and stuff throughout the day, and it's suddenly you have no information. And the way they do the after school club with mine is that it's lots of mixed ages. That was totally different. Like Callum was playing with 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds. That's just a weird thing for him. So I think that was the key thing, is just kind of having to find different ways and using that network to understand from the parents who've been at that school for a lot longer, like how it works, because you're not going to get as much information as you did before. And the very, very final thing I would say is that I guess all schools are different, but the after school places were like gold dust. So months before we started, I'm luckily, I have a friend whose kid was a few years older in that school, and I got onto her and I got the named contact and the mobile number of the person who ran the after school club. So I reached out way before officially you were meant to cement that place. So I would highly recommend doing that if that's possible as well.
Great advice there. Thanks, Marianne. And whilst we're on the topic, I guess, of childcare, so many questions from people when they registered for this event asked us about school holidays and how that works, and how you kind of manage the extracurricular commitments of your children, and the big school holidays that most of us don't have that much annual leave allocation in our workplaces. So again, could maybe a couple of you just talk about that side of things and how you've managed and what you've done to enable that not to impact on your career and work?
So planning ahead is super important. Obviously we try and take some kind of holiday in the summer that's during that period, so that gets rid of a few weeks if we can. And then now that the kids are a bit older, they can do various sort of active camps that are available at various schools in the area, and they did 2 weeks of that this summer with some of their friends who go to a different school. So that was absolutely brilliant, actually, and they were kind of full proper days, from sort of 8:30 until 5 or something. So that worked well. And then actually we had kind of a week and a half where they just had to entertain themselves. And I had a lot of guilt about that. I thought, oh my goodness, how is this going to go? But it was brilliant because they learned that it's okay to be bored. and the kind of creativity and the games they come up with. I know it's harder if you've got younger kids, but you know, once they're sort of 4 and 7, for example, like mine, it was amazing what they could come up with. And yeah, we had to break up a few fights, but overall, I kind of think it's okay as well for kids to be a bit bored, is what we learned. So definitely we just winged it a little bit, and it worked pretty well for us this summer.
Great, thanks. I think there's probably a lot of people out there that would say winging it is a tool and a strategy in and of itself sometimes. So thanks. Does anyone else have any other things they want to say around kind of school holidays and provision over that period?
Do you want to go, Marina?
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's the first time I've ever done it this year. And so I just have one bit of advice. This is my experience. So I thought naively that the biggest challenge was to do work out what the childcare was going to be, because that is a big deal, like who's going to go where. I didn't take into account how exhausting it is to manage them over the course of those 6 weeks. So we were lucky I could drop Callum off in Bristol with my parents for a week, but I had to drive there and had to drive back, and have to drive there again and drive back. And we had 2 holidays, which was great, in Scotland and Ireland, but I drove 2,000 miles over the course of 6 weeks. And even when Pete's parents were able to be with us for a week, which was great, I was preparing the house and we were looking after them. And it's just not, we didn't have one day that was like a normal day where it was kind of a 9 to 5 staying in the house at all. So I'm completely exhausted. So my advice would be 2 things. One, having something different every day over the course of 6 weeks is too much, because Callum's behaviour was absolutely shocking by the end, actually quite quickly on. And secondly, have some leave for when they go back to school, because, well, I need it.
Yeah, and I think I've also noticed as well how exhausted they are after a full academic year of school. Like, they need that 6-7 weeks for a reason, right? So actually packing up the summer holidays with all manner of different things as well, they sort of need that release as well, don't they? Thanks so much. Hopefully that's covered people's questions around kind of the work schedule and the school schedule, and how some practical ideas on how to do that. Leaders Plus is obviously all about kind of career progression and young children. So I'm keen to just find out as well from the panelists how perhaps having children at school has changed the dynamic from a work context, and perhaps has it posed any kind of barriers or challenges for you that are perhaps different to when your children were at nursery. Mariam, you're nodding, so it sounds like maybe you've got some thoughts on that. Can we come to you first?
You can. I'm just conscious I just spoke a lot, but yes, happy to do so. I think the difference for me, apart from the issue around just it being much more time than I thought it would, like I've said before, I think it was mentally much more challenging for me, in terms of they suddenly go to school and they have relationship issues that you have to kind of help them manage, and COVID anxiety and all of that. So that was something in some ways, if you can get the childcare right, they come home, they're exhausted. In some ways, you have a bit more space to kind of focus on your career. But the time when they do need you, you really need to be on it. That's been my experience, at least. You have much more complex conversations. So I think what I've learned is I wish I was planning actually to change jobs before Callum went to school, because I thought, right, this is going to be an opportunity where I can kind of do that, because it's the great release. And I chose not to for various reasons. And I think that was something that I really appreciated. And I basically spent the autumn going, I'm just going to spend that term just doing what I'm currently doing in my job and focusing on Callum. And then after that first term, going, actually, I kind of know how it's going to work. So now from January, I'm going to think about how am I going to think about progressing. And it's also in that first term when you kind of work out, how is my work-life balance going to change? Because it does, it's subtle, but it does. And also we needed those few months to work out how the balance with my partner as well was going to change, because we had to be responsible for different things, and we had to have that conversation we did when I first went back to work, to be like, actually, I'm doing more than you, how do we sort this out? And also then to be much clearer with work and be like, these are my new boundaries that I have. these are the different kind of times. That's how I completely changed my work pattern at that point as well. So I kind of gave myself the space to go, this whole term I'm just going to focus on Callum, I'm going to focus on kind of understanding how it works. And then it was in the January I went, okay, now I have a sense of how it's going to go. Now I can think about what I want to do next. Personally for me, that's involved realizing that I love my job, I love what I do, I'm confident at it, and I've done it for a long time, so I can now try and find different ways to develop while I'm currently in this role. So taking on different trustee roles, or taking on, you know, different fellowships and things like that, and network in a way that when you first start a new job or a big promotion, it's hard to have that space. So I've kind of said to myself, well, in these first few early years of primary school, I'll keep the same job where I know I'm confident, I know the work-life balance works, and I can actually find these other ways to kind of develop. And that's what I mean, kind of ambition within stability. That's what works for me. But you know, others will have different experiences, I know.
Gabriel, did you want to clip in there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe just because it's quite a different experience, perhaps for me. I guess actually, since I've had children, and actually since they've been at primary school, I think my career's probably never progressed quicker. I know that's probably unusual. I do have a fantastic employer. We still work really, really hard. But I think you mentioned the word boundaries, Mariam, and that I think is a really crucial one. And setting those boundaries with my management team. And for example, we had this really big work event, but it was on the first day of my daughter's going to reception. And I just said, there's no way I'm going to miss that. It's too important. And that day that I missed at work, the event they did, it's been talked about for years since on my project. But I always say, oh yeah, I wasn't there because it was my daughter's first day of school. So kind of cementing the fact that that's more important to me than coming to one day. It hasn't impacted the work I do or how I do that. And I'm always quite open about the fact I have a family with work, happy to talk about them, share, you know, what I do, but they can see my commitment to my work, my career progression. You know, it hasn't had an impact. So actually I've kind of almost had to say to my manager, look, I am ambitious. I want to keep progressing. You know, I don't want to hold back. This isn't the time for me. I know that's not for everyone, but that has been the case for me. And it has worked really well. And I hope that my kids can see that, you know, both my husband and I have careers that we really love, that we've worked incredibly hard for. And that I hope can kind of role model that they too can do that. And that, you know, things like having children doesn't need to put a stop to kind of what you want for yourself.
And I think what's great there is this idea of, you know, being clear on your boundaries, and I think that's something we talk a lot about actually on the fellowship, but also being kind to yourself through kind of strategically creating that space if you can, particularly as you say, Mariam, in those kind of first unsettling kind of terms and things like that. Like if there's a way that you can strategically do that, that can often really help. One of the questions that came in from our audience was around, I guess, how do you optimize your efficiency when you're juggling? And we're kind of leaning to that a little bit in the boundary setting piece. How do you optimize your efficiency when you're juggling the kind of school schedule? And does anybody have any really practical kind of solutions to that? I mean, obviously, Gabriel, you're talking about you finishing early on a Friday. Do you do anything to kind of enable you to do that? Likewise, Marina, Mariam, if you've got any thoughts there, that would be super useful.
I'll be super quick because I know I just spoke. There are two things. So firstly, I blocked that out in my diary. It's just there, so people can't put meetings in. If they try, I'll just say, unless it's something that really I have to prioritize, and of course I do, and then, you know, my husband or my mum can pick the kids up. Like, no, that's my time. But the other thing that I do, and this is something that I think is really important, especially when you work full time, I absolutely refuse to volunteer for anything around the PTA or any other school things. And my God, the pressure is unbelievable. I was not prepared for that. The pressure on those WhatsApp group. And there have been times where I felt a bit wobbly, like I'm not doing anything. And then I have to remember there are other people who either are not working or who are really not, or just working very part-time. I don't need to take this on. I can support by buying raffle tickets. I can, you know, do other things, or, you know, buy a cake or something at the cake sale. But I have a very clear boundary that I will not volunteer for anything at school. And that's what works for me.
Great, thank you. Marina, do you want to comment?
Yeah, it's just being, I mean, it was probably mentioned before, but being unapologetic when it comes to protecting your time. Being at work, if you do have to finish at 3 o'clock, which occasionally I do to pick up the children, when it is my turn to do so, you're open about it to your team, saying, these are my working hours. As I said before, block out your diary, protect your time, and be 100% there for your children, because they will appreciate that, regardless of whether you only spend 2 hours with them in the day. If you're there 100%, that's you. And for me, that time where we do the dinner and the bedtime shifts, etc., to get that done, and then I log on in the evening to catch up. But then that's just how it works for me. But protecting that time, because I can do flexi hours, and actually my employer as well, we are more open and more family friendly in that sense, to allow you to take a step back if you want to, regardless of whether it's an emergency or not. Take a step back, knowing that you can deliver. Remember, you are not the only person who can do your job. Yes, okay, you may be anxious about protecting your job, but you've got a team around you for that reason, so that when you go on holiday, who's doing that job for you? Your team. Therefore, you can step away for a couple of hours and let someone just step in briefly to help assist, because you'll be assisting them when they do the same. So be that change you want to see effectively in your workplace.
From my perspective, there are 2 things that I do. So one is I technically work 4 days a week, Tuesday to Friday, 100% over those 4. But I similarly have a flexible employer. So I do 2 hours on Monday evening that no one knows about. I do all of my emails, I clear it, and I have delay send on all of those emails. So people don't know that I do that, but it means I don't start on Tuesday completely overwhelmed and chasing my tail from the beginning. So that's one thing. So there's ways for you to set boundaries that people even don't realize, because when you're at work, it's hard to have that time just to focus on deep thinking or emails. And that's so important when you've got kids and you're trying to juggle everything. And the second thing is there was a session that Leaders Plus did, which completely changed the way that I work, hopefully forever. I have no emails in my inbox. I'm ruthless. Before the next week, I plan every single half hour in my diary, with not just my meetings, but exactly what I'm going to do in all of that time, and I protect it. It's completely over the top. It looks like it, but it's changed the way that I work. So yeah, kind of making sure that every minute I do at work is purposeful and focused. It's very intense, but it means that I finish every day at 5:30, which is great.
Thanks, Marianne. I'm still fielding out some questions from people that came through in advance of the session. If there's any that have sort of come up as we've been talking from our audience, please feel free to pop them in the chat. I can see, Gabriel, you've just replied on a specific one around kind of culture. So if anyone's interested in that side of things, feel free to have a look at the chat. But if anybody wants to drop anything in there for the last few minutes, please feel free, and we'll make sure that we direct it out. Let's talk COVID a little bit, because that's been a challenging period and could still be so for some going into this new academic term, and the unpredictability of COVID in schools. Has anybody got any experience of kind of last minute class closures, children being sent home, and that last minute kind of rush to figure out what to do? Because I'm sure there are people here whose children have just started reception who have no idea how that's going to play out. Anybody got anything that they can share to reassure, or advice on that side of things? We've got nervous laughter, I think, everywhere, because I think we're all still worried that that's still going to happen. Marina,
I'm sure I'm not unique in saying this, but yes, we've all been in that, whether it's COVID or the child being sick, you have to adapt. And again, my employer, we have room to do so to be able to be at home. Right now, working from home has enabled us to be more present for our family members, as well as do work at any time. Now, during the period where our children were at home, and we did the schoolwork early in the mornings. They woke up at 6 a.m. anyway, so we thought, you know what, 7:30, let's do some work, do a few hours of work, and then after that, it's up to them what they want to do, because then it gets all the curricular activities out of the way, and then you can then either focus on your work or just hop between them, but they have free play, but knowing that schoolwork is done. So as Marion mentioned, but it's all about planning your time, and sticking to that plan allows you to have a bit more freedom. In terms of discipline means freedom, but having that freedom to do whatever you want, let them run around in the garden for a while, stop off for lunch, cook lunch, etc., etc. But being at home, having that plan, and ensuring that your employer is aware of your circumstances, because they will provide you support, because they want you to be at your best. If you do not tell them what's going on, they're not going to be able to know, and therefore they can't support you.
I love that tip around first thing in the morning, get the schoolwork out the way. And I'm totally going to take that myself, because getting my son to read at bedtime, he's just shattered, and it's just like, that's a total no-brainer. That's just, I'm taking that away with me. Thanks, Marina. We can just take a last question before somebody's just asked us to share a little bit more about Leaders Plus, which obviously I'm keen to also do. Someone's just come through and talked about, have any of you used unpaid leave for school holidays? And if yes, could you tell us about that? It doesn't look like anybody has, but for that person who sent us that message, if you want to just drop us a line, we maybe be able to connect you up with somebody that has. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. We're going to come back right at the very end as we wrap up for your final top tips, but for the benefit of those on the call, let me just quickly share more about Leaders Plus, and for anybody that's interested in the fellowship, how they can go about learning more and applying before we wrap up. I'm conscious people have got probably doing this in their lunch break and running off to another meeting. So let me just quickly share my screen. So this just gives you an overview of who Leaders Plus is as an organisation. We're a social enterprise. We help new parents as they navigate their leadership career with young children. We build a positive movement for change. So our fellows join a community of fellows who are all at a similar point in their career with young families. And we really support our fellows to continue progressing alongside having that young family. And we really believe as an organisation that the two can go hand in hand, but there are definitely kind of tips and tools that can really help you do that successfully, and we talk and cover a lot of that in our 9-month fellowship programme, the details of which are listed here on this slide. So we offer a 9-month programme consisting of world-class professional development, where you will also match with the senior leader mentor who has combined a very senior leadership career with young children themselves. The peer network that you form is cited as one of the most powerful things of the fellowship, actually, that cross-sector peer network, not only for that support from a professional parenting perspective, but also you know, the ability to learn best practice in other sectors as well as being cited as really invaluable. All of our sessions are children friendly. When you join the cohort, you will enter into a group on the fellowship that's either specifically parents with primary age children, or actually with younger early years, or even babies as well. So we split our cohort up in that way. So through that programme, we really equip you with the tools to realise your career vision, but without compromising that time and being present with your family. Who's it for? It's for middle and senior leaders. As I said, it's a cross-sector programme. We offer entry for people with early years age children, or primary, as I've said. If you would like to know more, we encourage anybody to book a call back with me, where I can talk you through the detail of the programme, how to apply, and discuss your individual circumstances around that specifically. So you can book that call through our website, and we'll send you a link for that after this session when we send the recording. You can also download our application form on our website. We are open currently for our autumn programme, and the deadlines are listed here on the slide. So if anybody is keen to know more and keen to find out how to go about applying, please do feel free to reach out to any one of us in the team at Leaders Plus, or indeed book a callback request, as I've said, and we can send you more information. With time not massively on our side, I would love to wrap up. Please take 2 minutes to just fill out our feedback survey, please. And that link should be coming to you in the chat. As we go to wrap up, I would just love to come back to Marina, Gabriel and Mariam to say a huge thank you for joining us today. I know you're hugely busy. Thanks for sharing your insights. If you wouldn't mind just giving us 2-3 words of like top tips for anybody on this call in preparing for school or indeed supporting those little ones that have just started. Any top tips you would like to share before we close out?
I think firstly, just set your boundaries, both at work and also, establishing that at home as well with your partner around who's doing what. And secondary is don't volunteer for the PTA.
Wonderful, thank you, Gabriel. Moana, any top tips?
Yeah, discipline equals freedom. Have that in your mind, knowing that you can do it, because you can do it. It's been done before, you will do it, and it will be done again. That's all I can say.
There's so many of us before us that have done it and come out the other side, so you're so right. And Marianne?
Just for when they have to be isolating from for COVID, which probably will happen, our reception teacher said at various points they would normally only do maximum about an hour learning over the course of a day. Wow. So that's your benchmark. Everything else is free play and engagement with the other kids. So kind of that I kept that as my touch point throughout, because you can do an hour, you don't have to do 7.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our attendees who've joined. We hope that that's been useful. As I said, we'll send the recording. If you would like more tips and advice and would love to join the community, we have our wonderful Leaders with Babies podcast, which is full of these types of conversations and more, as well as you can join our newsletter as well, where we circulate more information and tips and advice as well. So thanks to everybody for joining.